Welcome to our class. This week we will begin to learn how to use cascading style sheets. Years ago, the HTML elements had many attributes which helped form the layout and presentation. Today we use the HTML elements as containers for our content. All of the styling is the job of CSS. So let's take a look at how we do this in the HTML document. And I am using Adobe Brackets, and I have a working folder that I have opened, and here is my index.html. It is located in my root. I have my doc type, HTML element, and the closing one further down. Here's my head section. I have my meta character set tag and my title. Cascading style sheets can be embedded in the head section. The opening and closing style tag belongs in the head section and nowhere else. We also can take them out of the head section and store them in an external file. That external file is the link element. rel equals style sheet, href equals the name of the CSS file. We'll do that in class. I would like to point out that this is the official link element. Many people and some textbooks call the A or anchor element the link element. Technically, it is not. Cascading style sheets can also be called from within inside the HTML element using the style attribute. These are called inline styles. Inline styles work very well. However, anything in the body stays there permanently. If you put your style sheets in the embedded styles, you can ultimately remove them and put them in an external style sheet. The beauty of both embedded and external style sheets is that we can direct the styles based on the screen type, and this is how we create responsive web pages for mobile devices. That is beyond the scope of this course. However, I will cover it briefly at the end of the semester. So I'm explaining to you ahead of time why inline styles are not the preferred way to go. However, there's nothing wrong with them. A CSS style consists of a selector. For example, the body selector. A selector is the place on the web page where the style will be applied. Every HTML element that contains content can be used as a selector. This is called an element selector. The drawback to this is that it applies to every element in the web page, which might not be what you want. However, it also could be what you want. The style rules go inside the opening and closing curly braces, and notice that Adobe Brackets puts that in for us. I would also like to caution you to please learn good coding practices with both your CSS and your HTML. Line up opening and closing braces, indent if possible. The more consistent your code is, the easier it is to read. Okay, a CSS rule consists of a property, such as, here we have font size. Notice how nice. Look at my editor helping me. These are all different CSS properties. There are probably close to 100 of them, and they all have different values. Some values are part of the language, some values you choose. So if I were to use font size, now I'm setting this to 100%. So let me just explain this. The browser has a default font size set in already, and it's generally 16 pixels, which equivalents to 100%, which equivalents to 100%, which equivalents to 1 EM. An EM is a relative unit, and so it is percents. You want to use relative units for your font sizes because they scale nicely when it comes to different screen sizes. You will see developers doing this, always setting the font size to 100%. That means regardless of what your font family is, it's going to start at 100%, which works well when you start scaling up and scaling down. You also want to initialize a font family. The font family has to do with the type of font. You can use a default type such as a cursive, fantasy, monospace, sans serif, or serif. This is whatever the default will be in the user's browser. However, I like to use a sans serif font. It works better on the web. If the font name is more than one word, you need to put quotations around it. This is generally how most web developers start out with declaring the default fonts. This is the property. On the right is the value. This is the only CSS property that can take multiple values. You will see some CSS properties take various parameters, but they're not individual unique values. What this is saying is, this is my first choice, comma, this is my second choice, comma, this is my third choice. My third choice will just be any generic sans serif font. So this is the syntax, property, value. Now, your spacing doesn't matter. You can write it like this. You can put spaces on each side. And what you want to do is you want to acquire a style for how you like to write. This is my style. I like writing down. I like seeing every property on a line. Some people like writing across. Here again, make it easy to read and understand and use white space. White space works well for making code readable. This is called a global style. As I said earlier, all of the content is inside the body. So the first thing you want to do, you want to declare global styles. Should you wish to do a background color for the whole page, that would work there too. Let's talk a little bit more about fonts. There is an @font_face directive, which allows you to embed your own fonts. And here we have the property set and the name of the custom font, and this is the source. The only drawback to this is number one, you have to upload it. Number two, you probably have to use multiple formats. If you were using this, then you would code the font here. All right, there's my font, and this is where we're declaring it, so to speak. All right, this is a directive. These are called embedded fonts. They're not that popular anymore. A better choice is Google hosted fonts, which I'm not going into in this video. However, you can Google it and find out how to use Google hosted fonts. It works very well. I believe the website companion for this textbook talks about Google hosted fonts. All right, so if we were to save this and I load this in my browser here, you can see it's a little different. I always prefer using sans serif fonts. That seems to be the convention for web files. I can change the style of my A tag. Now this is an element selector. Supposing I wanted my links to be black. This is the color property. So here's the syntax, property, value, semicolon. By the way, always semicolons at the end. So if I were to save this and take a look, now my links are black. Let's change that color. Let's make them red because everything else is black. Notice you have all kinds of nice colors you can use. There is also a text decoration property. Here again, look at the nice code hinting. And these are the different values. And we're going to say text decoration none. What the text decoration is, it's either a line through or an underline. By default, hyperlinks are underlined. This is how we get rid of that ugly line. There you go. So editors help you learning the code and choosing the preset values also. So this is an element selector. It means it applies to every element. Let's use the header. Let's do an inline style here. Supposing we wanted to make the background color, and I'll just say yellow, it's easy. This is an example of an inline style. The actual style rules are the same as in the embedded style, however, they are called from a style attribute. This is an HTML attribute, and it's calling property : value. So whenever you have a CSS, colons are CSS, curly braces are CSS. So if I save this and I preview, remember I told you that these block level elements are 100% the width of the parent container, which right now is the body. We don't have any fixed widths here. We're going to do that next week. So you can see this is the text. This is actually the H1. Okay, the text is not, the container is not as wide as the text. The container is a block element. We also have what are called IDs. Supposing we wanted to make our first link ID equals home. These are selectors. Supposing we wanted to make our first link unique. Because I am using the value of home, the rule is you can only use that value once in the document. Technically speaking, it will work. However, JavaScript uses the ID attribute as a unique identifier. So don't use the same value twice. You can use as many ID attributes as you want. The values have to be unique. This is a selector. How we write this selector in CSS is pound. So if you take a look at someone's web page and you see pound home, you should say, oh, there is an ID equals home somewhere here. Now, supposing I wanted this color to be navy, there you go. The color is now navy for this link, the other ones. ID selectors will take precedence over an element selector. By the way, there are a zillion color pickers on the web. In the Text Companion website, there are links. Colors are for text color and background colors. They can be written as the color name. They can also be written in what is called a hexadecimal value, an RGB value, and an HSL value. So it makes it very easy to come in and pick colors with these nice color pickers. In addition to ID selectors, we have what are called class selectors. And it's a class attribute. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say class, and now I'll go into the footer and I'll do the same thing. All right. Classes can be used over and over again, and you can create as many as you need. So if you were going to want to apply the same style in multiple locations and the element selector didn't work well, you can use a class selector. And that's a class attribute. Its only purpose in life is for applying CSS. And that is indicated with a period and also a background color. There's background color. Beautiful. I bet you silver's here. There it is. All right. So if I were to save this, and there we are. Notice that in our document, we have an italic tag. Nothing wrong with this. However, we can now replace this with CSS. Remember, if you can replace an HTML element with CSS, and there's a handful, you can do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to a span. A span is an inline generic element, and its pretty much purpose is for calling CSS. So if I were to say class equals italic, now I can create a CSS class up here. Remember, a class is preceded by a period, and this is the font style property. And notice these are the values. Italic and oblique pretty much are the same thing. So if I were to save this and reload it, it still looks italic. We also have a font weight property. There we go, font weight. And that pretty much replaces the bold. Some of these values don't show a difference. Up to about 400, it's the same. However, I prefer bold. Bold looks wonderful. And I can save that in a minute. Let's see what else we have here. All right, so we have font size, font family, some other new font properties that are not in your book. Font variant. I can make that small caps. So here we have an example of applying multiple properties and values to this class, and wherever that class is called, those properties will take effect. And that class is right down here inside our span tag. And here we have our font variant uppercase. So how would we create an external style sheet? All you do is remove what's inside. You don't want to copy the opening closing style tag. That's HTML. All you want are the styles. So if I were to say Control X, now I'm going to open up a new file, File, New, and now I'm going to say Control V. The only thing that goes in an external style sheet are the selectors and the rules. No HTML element, no doc type, no style tags. If there is any HTML in here, it will not work. So I save it, File, Save As, and I'm going to put it in the same folder. There's my web folder, and I'll call it styles.css. This is a text file, just like an HTML file is with a .css extension. And then I go back into my web page. I need to call the file, styles, and I can save this. I'll make a change here in this inline style. I'll just make this aqua, so you know that we actually reloaded the page. There we go. Everything looks the same. I would like to point out, in the old days, I would like to point out some old-fashioned HTML attributes. So in the body tag, we had the link attribute, which set the color, the A link, which set active color for the links, and the text set the text color. We also had this font tag. These are deprecated. They were deprecated back in HTML4. Deprecated means you're not supposed to use them. You may still see old code on the internet. I'm just pointing that out. All right, so before we leave, let's go to the Palomar College website, and you can right-click on the homepage and go to View Source. This is one way of looking at source code. I will show you different things you can do in the future. And here you notice we have an HTML5 doc type. However, we have XHTML over here. This is a WordPress site. It's not always correct. Here again, you're going to see a lot of wrong stuff on the internet, just pointing that out. Here, there's 2 external style sheets, just pointing that out. All right, it is very common for large websites to have multiple style sheets. You might also see embedded styles, which we see right here. and you might see inline styles. There is nothing wrong with it. All three are generally prevalent in fully functioning websites.